Anytime.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, we apologize for Zach Seegers trying to commandeer our show, but it's not going to happen. Pat, it was a disappointing end to what ended up being a really, really fun Broncos season. In fact, Pat, it was so much fun that for one of the first times ever, I don't think that you and I can quite cover the historical nature of this season. I think we're going to need a little bit of help.
Hey, feel I'm in the mood for a switch up. I hit the function, hit the rose till I hiccup. I hit the stage and leave with money that's a stick up.
That's right. It is the second ever edition of Engage 8. And you could even make the argument that the first one didn't really count because Bree Maestas was not a part of it. If you are new to this show, where the fuck have you been? It's the best show that you could be watching. And I say that with guests from other podcasts. That's how bold I am. Wow. This is Engage 8 on Altitude Adjustment. So just in case you're having a hard time grasping this concept, basically there are 8 of us who are engaging in Broncos talk. And I sought out some of the best minds in all of Broncos country, but they were busy, so we made do with what we had. With me, as always, of course, is Patrick Chiotti, the most handsome man I think I've ever seen in my life. Bree Maestas, one of the most terrifying human beings that I've ever met in my life. Glenn Hauser from the MHRT Network and the 5280 podcast. Joey Richards from the Let's Talk Broncos podcast. Cameron Parker from Manely Broncos. Frankie's Films from the Full Field Read. And Jordan Lopez from Broncos Avenue. And that is how you do that. I'm going to kick it over to Patrick Chiotti for our very first topic. And we're going to keep it nice and simple, easy breezy, okay? I want everybody to share their favorite part of the 2024 Broncos season. Pat, we'll start with you.
It's honestly really easy. I don't really need to explain much. Every Bo Nix touchdown was my favorite part of the season.
And there were a lot.
And there were quite a few. Much more than they predicted, I'll say. But the reason it was my favorite part is because almost every single one was like a little ball of stress, right? You see him just rip that ball out of his hand, and you're like, oh my God, this is either going to be picked off or it's going to be a touchdown. And every single time it was a touchdown, it was like a piece of my heart came back from the last 9 years. So that was my favorite part. What about y'all?
Bree, there was a lot to choose from. What was your favorite part? And I think, Bree, it's important to note that this is what everybody's going to hang their hat on. Everyone else's opinion is just kind of whatever. But people are tuning in to know what Bree Maestas thinks. What was your favorite part of the season?
Mario, I appreciate that because you're right. I am at the top of the pyramid for a reason. The rush of a win streak. For a reason, has to be my favorite part of the season. Winning that 5 out of 6, starting with the Buccaneers, you could feel the difference when watching this team. I haven't had a lot of fun in the last 9 years. I've had a lot of fun in the last 9 years, but being a Broncos fan, it was a little rough. But watching this team in 2024 was like being reborn again. And I think you could feel the thawing out of those cold, dead hearts of thousands of Broncos country because they finally showed life. And the energy of this season is going to be hard to recreate until that very first playoff win next season hits.
I love that. Glenn, I guess there are a few people that value your opinion somewhere.
Oh, my God.
What was your favorite part?
Glenn, welcome to the show.
No, I want to say this, because anybody that thinks I'm being needlessly mean to Glenn has never seen Glenn try to interact with me in the chat during my own show. So Glenn had this coming. So don't anybody feel bad for Glenn, okay? Go ahead, Glenn.
Mario's dressed with the outfit he got at the B. Arthur estate sale. For me, you know what? It was probably getting the texts from the people that are normally busting my balls and ripping at the Broncos. saying, "Oh my gosh, or holy shit, their Bo Nix is unbelievable," and seeing that, like getting these people all of a sudden they're on our side, they're seeing a difference, and to me that indicated that we've rounded the corner and we're on the trajectory up.
Absolutely. Joey, what say you?
I got the Broncos versus Falcons game. That was memorable to me. That was the game where it started to feel like, oh wow, the Broncos might actually be like legit here for me. Because you got to think at that time the Falcons were a winning football club. That was a 6-5 team that they played. Of course they had their concerns. It was earlier in the season. We're like midway through though. We're really stacking it up. Bo Nix came off a great game against Carolina, but at the time that was the Panthers. Terrible. But then goes into this Falcons game. We win 38-6. Bo Nix goes for 300 yards, 4 touchdowns, dominant performance. And I don't know. That's just when I started believing a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I love that. Cam, keep in mind that you are not allowed to talk for 30 minutes, but go ahead and share your favorite part of this season.
Cam, welcome to the show.
There's just so many to choose from. But I gotta say,
Well, pick one, Cam.
But my favorite moment of the season is actually the scuffles or interactions, if you will, between Sean Payton and Bo Nix. I think that one thing that has always been in my mind has been the picture of Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson on the sideline in that Carolina Panthers game, where it was lifeless. It was lifeless. Hackett looked lifeless, and you actually had a quarterback in Bo Nix that went after Sean, right? Like went after Sean, and I thought that specifically, considering that's the coach that handpicked you. I mean, like you stood your ground. You stood your ground. You actually basically became the guy, if you will, at that moment.
Frankie, I know that you've probably watched more film than just about anybody on this team, so I'm really looking forward to see what's your favorite part of the season.
So I had to go with the fact, like, watching Bo develop from week 1 to week 8, or well, honestly, to the wild card round, like the things he was bad at to then they aren't really that glaring of issues anymore. There are still small things that get to come up, but like weeks 1, the Seattle game, like watching that game was a little bit brutal. Seeing some of the mistakes he was making. I mean, he was making true rookie decision or errors. The way he was scrambling himself into pressure, but by the wild card round, like he's actually standing in and firing shots over the middle of the field, which is just like, fuck yeah, we have like a franchise quarterback for the first time in 9 years, which is just excellent. So that was my favorite part.
Jordan, take us home. Your favorite part of the Broncos season.
Well, I mean, Joey and I do have a very similar one. For me, it was the Falcons game because that was also the game that I thought, hey, this kid Bo's for real. I mean, I didn't want to declare him as the franchise quarterback so early on in the season. I wanted to keep on, throughout the whole season, see him develop. But after watching that game in person in Denver, it was that was the moment I was like, all right, we do have our quarterback of the future.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that felt like a game that it's not close. So we'll just touch on this really quick. Going into that game, like I was worried because it wasn't a primetime game, and typically non-primetime Kirk Cousins is really good. They were iffy against the run. Everybody knew how good Bijan Robinson was. Mm-hmm. The defense was fantastic. Bo Nix was damn near perfect. Like Pat and I even did like a joke of a show where we were criticizing Bo Nix, and Pat literally broke down the 5 incompletions that he had, and I think like 2 or 3 of them weren't even really his fault. So I'm glad that you guys brought that up because that was a real true turning point of the season that you really knew that this team was legit. One of the big reasons, Jordan, we're going to start back with you and we'll snake back around. One of the big reasons that this team had the success that they did this season was because of Vance Joseph. He took the like a bunch of anonymous guys, really, like outside of Pat Surtain. Before this season, there wasn't really a household name on this Broncos defense. The question, though, Jordan, is what happened? I mean, this went from a top 5, top 10 defensive unit to a defense that couldn't stop a nosebleed the last couple months of the season, aside from playing the Kansas City Chiefs JV squad. Where do you attribute to that? Like, what was it about VJ's kind of last couple of months that had the wheels fall off?
Well, I do like how in the beginning of the season we were very aggressive. Our blitz rate was all the way up. it just towards the end of the season, it didn't seem like we were more aggressive like how we usually were. I know the injury to Riley Moss and having Levi Wallace out there for that one game was awful. And then some of the secondary roles that we had, it kind of kept Vance Joseph to play it safe than more aggressive at times. But I think some of the flaws within the defense came up to light, especially against that Browns game and that Monday Night Football game. I think a lot of things got exposed in that game. And as much as I love the secondary and how they played this year, I do think there might be a few changes coming in that secondary room. And then also I think the inside linebacker unit and that room too, I think that was also a bit exposed as well.
Frankie, what happened?
So there's a few things. One, the injuries that kind of happened on the back end. You had Riley Moss, Brandon Jones missed a little bit of time. I mean, you even had Sertan kind of get a little bit banged up in the middle of the season. Two, I think it was just kind of facing some really good offenses later in the year. Like outside of the Browns game, you faced Josh Allen in the wild card round. You faced Justin Herbert when he was kind of on a heater with the Chargers. You had Burrow. There was the Lamar Jackson Ravens game where they ran all over you. Like, yes, those are obviously glaring issues, but it's kind of like, man, like those teams were kind of beating up everybody this year. The other part about it is this is kind of the style of defense that Vance plays. So when you're going to have kind of worse teams you're coming up against, when you're sending a lot of shit at them, when you're blitzing them really heavily, when you're kind of confusing these worst quarterbacks, you're going to have a lot better of a time. Where I think it was just kind of more of a balancing out of like, early in the season, they got a lot of the high variance stuff. A lot of good things were going their way. You had defensive touchdowns. They were getting all these sacks. They were getting pressures left and right. Every blitz seemed like it was working. Later in the year, they faced some better quarterbacks that were better on third downs. Like really, like the first and second down defense remained pretty decent, honestly, later in the year. You just had Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert kind of making magic happen on third down. And it's kind of like that's going to happen to you sometimes. So I don't think it was necessarily too much of like, yes, they obviously did drop off, but I think it was just kind of like, that it's a little bit expected, and especially for how they were built, they still kind of did their job sometimes when it came to let's just create a massive splash play as opposed to just like we're going to limit you to only 15 points every week, because that's more what Fangio was trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Pam, where was the drop off with VJ?
You know, I feel like we're going to be saying a lot of the same stuff, but I feel like, you know, when you look at this team and you look at some of the personnel, I mean, like the drop off from specifically like the linebackers and the safeties, I felt like is where things just really just kind of just the wheels started to fall off a little bit. And I do think the injuries did play a part, right? I mean, like, you know, Moss did sustain his MCL, and, you know, and unfortunately, you know, it seemed like he wasn't fully recovered. And it looked like, as Frankie was mentioning, that Sertan was still kind of recovering a little bit from that injury in the Colts game. But like the linebacker room, it's frustrating because there was a point in like the midway point of the season where Justin Cernot specifically was actually playing really good football. And then unfortunately, it just was not sustainable. I think the other part of it too was like there were probably some certain adjustments, you know, that I would have liked to have seen a little bit more, like maybe see a little bit more Chris Abrams drain as the season was progressing. You know, it certainly seemed like he was playing really well in a small, limited amount of time. So just some small things, but I do think that they're certainly correctable in this offseason.
Joey, we saw the blow up between like Sean Payton and VJ, and I guess I'm gonna layer the question here. Was that just, you know, a tense moment between two coaches, or was there maybe something behind the anger that we saw from Sean Payton, or is that just like a Sean Payton thing? And do you attribute any of the failures over the last couple of months from the defense to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you went through a football season without any blowups on the sideline, I would be more worried about who cares than anything. Like like we were just talking about it with Bo Nix and Sean Payton. Someone brought that up. I forget who it was. And that frustrations happen in football. I don't think that's rare or uncommon at all. I don't even put any stock into it other than I'm like, okay, these two football guys really want to win this game. They're holding each other accountable. I don't think there's really anything there. I think Sean Payton's very happy with this decision to hire Vance Joseph as his defensive coordinator. This defense as a whole, I mean, what we saw towards the end of the year when we started playing these better teams, I think Frankie made a great point. That's a point I was going to make as well, is The Broncos just played better teams towards the end than they did at the beginning. We got tore up by these better teams. I just think that's kind of it, and I wouldn't put any stock into any sideline arguments.
So I love that Joey's calling out anybody who had some sort of problem with this exchange. And there were plenty of experts out there that tried to make this a big deal. Joey Richards basically calling you a moron if you thought that. Great stuff, Joey. Glenn, what do you think?
To echo some of the other things that have been said, the injuries hurt the better quarterbacks toward the tail end. I mean, in actuality, we gave up 17 points a game in the last 7 regular season games. The blow-up, I think, I don't think anyone had a 200-yard-plus rushing effort on the bingo card when Josh Allen was the quarterback. I was relieved when he was actually, dropping back to make a pass in that game. So I think some of those other circumstances. My big knock on Vance was in some of those games where the Broncos were getting eaten alive, especially the Browns game, is that I wish he had put Surtain or more on the star receiver. And I think that was one of the things that we all couldn't understand, why Jerry Jeudy was still being guarded by Levi Wallace in that game. Even later on, we're going back and forth. But, overall, like Joey said, I think he was a great hire. I give a guy a lot of credit. It's got to be hard to get back to the team that was the head coach and being a coordinator, and it was a route overall.
Yeah, Glenn, I think you could have done as good a job guarding Jerry Jeudy as Levi Wallace did that night. Wow. I'm going to add an extra layer. So I want you to let us know where you think the problems kind of began or what caused them. But I also want to add in the question, do you think Vance Joseph is a good enough defensive coordinator to potentially lead this team to a Super Bowl? So, we can get the opinions on Sean Payton. Obviously, he's the head coach. It's the coordinators that kind of go unnoticed typically, unless they're really, really good or really, really bad. Is Vance Joseph the D coordinator that could potentially help bring this team to a Super Bowl or make this a Super Bowl caliber defense?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch on the dust up just a moment, because I think that shows a lot of passion. And unless we saw a transcript of what transpired there, I don't think any of us has the acumen to be able to say what happened in that critical moment. But I've been around a lot of individuals who like football, and then I've been around people who love it and need it. And I think that is just typically what happens in the NFL. And you'd rather see that than, as a lot of the panel has noted, is just a lackadaisical approach there. But I want to chalk up the season falling off a little bit to inexperience and playing explosive offenses. Like Frankie noted there, depth has been a critical issue for this Broncos roster, which means that Vance Joseph has once again done the blowing out of expectations across the board here. And not even if you were a national analyst, Broncos fans alike were criticizing the depth along the roster on the defense. And typically, defenses should progress throughout the year and getting better, but they were dominant. They only allowed 32 touchdowns, and the pass rush was the least of the worries for this Denver Broncos defense. They were leading the lead in sacks. They allowed 3.9 yards per carry in the run game, and their turnover differential was tied with the Chiefs. So I want to say, if a defense wins championships and Super Bowls, why isn't what Vance Joseph is doing being touted as more important for how the Broncos found success this season? The offense was great. They held up their own. But when it comes down to winning close games and one-score games and fighting against teams like the Chiefs where they kept it close, that's all on the defense. And it comes down to the wear and tear of a 17-game regular season on a young defense overall.
That's why she's the best in the biz. Coach Pat, what do you think?
I think a lot of things happened this year. This team could have been really, really good if there was more emphasis on executing the little things all the time. Could have been really, really great. Just wanted to point out the comment from David Talks Broncos. This season taught me that running back is not a dime a dozen like I previously thought. I think this was the worst performing Broncos running back season in my lifetime. Is Jainty on the level of Barkley? We'll address the question after. But I think covering what everybody has said, the linebackers got exposed late down the season. The run defense was crumbling towards the end, and we saw it all culminate in the wild card game. And that's a direct response to something's going on with the linebackers, right? We saw the safety play drop off. We saw the Riley Moss injury. All of these things happen. And then you have an offense that is sometimes okay at converting third downs. They weren't really great at it this year. They had a couple times late down the season where they were really good at converting third downs. But for the most part, this team struggled so bad in that area. And it just continued to be like little miscues all the time. Somebody didn't hit this block angle correctly, right? Somebody didn't run the right route. We saw that at the end of the playoff game. Troy Franklin got his ass chewed out because he didn't do a tiny little thing that could have resulted in a first down, right? Maybe even a touchdown. So it's those important things that they just didn't quite get right. And Bree, you said it perfectly. It's the lack of experience in that area. Veterans know how to do those little things right all the time. This is a young team. They will learn, they will grow, but I think that is one of the biggest reasons why down the stretch things started to fall apart.
So, Pat, you're focusing on the little things, more of a big thing that we want to discuss now. And you touched on it a little bit. How does this team take that next step in the right direction? I think we can all agree that they exceeded every single Bronco fan's expectations. But now that you kind of see, you see what this team is made of. You have your quarterback. Thank God for the first time in a decade, we're not doing mock drafts where we're trying to figure out the quarterback position, or we're looking at the list of free agent quarterbacks. Because I don't think that I could deal with another year of being told that Joe Flacco is elite, or because Case Keenum got lucky in a playoff game that he's all of a sudden a franchise quarterback, and the list goes on and on and on. Thank God we never have to deal with that. But now everything shifts and there's pressure. There was no pressure on this team going into this season. This was kind of like do your best, make sure that Bo Nix is your quarterback. Now that they've made the playoffs with, bottom of the barrel roster players because of where this team was in terms of the Russell Wilson contract, the expectations are going to be much higher. And I think because of the nature of the AFC and how absolutely stacked and loaded it is, despite a down year from the Bengals, despite a down year from the Dolphins, there are a lot of really good teams in this conference. So how do you not only keep pace, but you continue to outpace them going forward? Pat, what do you think?
I mean, it just comes down to winning those close games. It comes down to those one or two possession games that you struggle to come back in or you struggle to get going with. Those are the games that are going to haunt you, and those are the games that are going to make a difference, right? So it kind of goes back to what I was saying. Just this team has got to be able to do the little things right, because that's what makes champions. New England was so fucking good for so long because they did everything exactly the way that it was supposed to be. Nobody took plays off. Nobody was missing assignments. And if they did, they got their ass chewed out. And that's kind of the standard that Sean Payton is going to build. We've seen it 2 years now. We saw him screaming at Russ because he couldn't get a play in right. We saw him multiple times this season chewing out players because the expectation is growing within the locker room and within the franchise. And the coaches know it, the players know it, but the players have to be able to hold up their end of the bargain. Coaches will always harp that you have to do the little things right. And that's what's going to make the difference, is winning those close games. That's simple.
Bree, how does this team take the next step next year and they go from a 7 seed to, a 5 seed, or potentially even challenging to win this division?
Well, they did a great job of blowing the expectations up right in front of our very eyes. They've got their head coach. They have their QB. They're lacking firepower, though, and that's specifically on the offense. They need to find the spark. They need to stop the self-inflicted mistakes, and they need to maintain the efficiency moving forward. And I think the only way that this team really makes it easier on their offense to score more points is to find that game changer. It's got to be in one of the three positional groups we've all been talking about ad nauseum, running back, wide receiver, tight end. I mean, is there a tight end on the market that could break a 200-yard receiving mark? That was definitely missing from this year's bunch. You have to identify your free agents as well. Like, who is a non-negotiable that this Denver Broncos team can't lose? DJ Jones and Cody Barton are at the top of that list for me. And the Broncos will be middle of the pack in terms of cap space, but they have to spend wisely. They just excavated themselves from this huge financial hole. And so even though it sounds really dorky and kind of lame, I think the key is flexibility financially, contract wise, talent wise. Get your bang for your buck, draft the talent, and then target the best player available. I would love it if it was an offensive lineman, right? Like set the tone there. I know the skill player is increasingly important, but the thermostat has already been set for this team. There's an expectation in place, and now it's time to make increasingly smart moves as they move forward. That is the only way that they'll stay afloat when it comes to a team like Kansas City or the Raiders, who are going to eventually turn it around. And then, the Chargers will continue to fail in the postseason, so we don't have to worry about that.
Bria, I want to let you know that Mike waited until it was your turn to talk to let everyone know that he thinks that this is the best show on the planet. So well done there. Glenn, what do you think?
Me to start
he's
talking.
muted.
Mario muted me.
Just talk, Glenn.
I know. I'm working on it. Got to make sure you're not messing with the things here. You're just doing your deal.
I don't even know how to mute, Glenn, okay? I'm going to reach through the internet and slap you. Just answer the question.
Listen, I saw how the sausage was made before. Quixote is the brains of this operation, okay?
Whoa. You're giving way too much credit here.
Glenn, you're not going to come on the altitude adjustment and talk about sausage, okay? Why don't you just pump the brakes real quick?
Answer the question.
I call Pat the custodian because he cleans up Mario's messes here. But anyway, the beauty of this is that we've already started the progression, ahead of time. We have our quarterback. Our younger guys got a playoff experience regardless of the outcome and the beating that ended up happening. So now we can take those next steps. And all of a sudden, Denver is an attractive free agent destination. It's not only we've got our QB, we've got our coach and Zach Seeger's favorite general manager, George Payton, we've got him. But we've also have these owners that are sparing no expense and they're building new facilities. So we're going to be able to attract some free agents, full complement of draft picks, and so we can fill these deficiencies that we have. Because there are a few really glaring ones that if we can get those filled, add a little depth to the mix, next year definitely should be much better than a 10-win season.
Joey, as arguably the foremost authority on taking steps forward, given all the positive steps that you've taken throughout your life, what do you think the Broncos should do?
I have to echo Glenn in that they already did. I think this playoff experience was massive. That was huge. That was the first step in wow, the Broncos have arrived. I think even losing in the fashion that they did to one of the youngest teams in the league, they're getting into this offseason hungry. They want it. But I hate to be the guy that comes in here after all this and is still talking about quarterback. But my whole thing is how do we continue our quarterback's improvement? I think that's super important. I'm not going to just shy away from that this offseason. Bo Nix still needs to improve. And we've seen sophomore slumps and quarterbacks go through their ups and downs. And now it's on the coaching staff to make sure that doesn't happen, those downs. How do we surround Bo Nix with the adequate weapons to make sure that he is playing at an even increased level next year? I think the Broncos could use a wide receiver one if that ever arrived. Garrett Wilson is the name that we've seen Broncos fans have thrown around, right? Tight end position. That affects both blocking and receiving. Super bad at the receiving this year, just all around. And then the running back position. We've nailed that. That's something we need to fix. I don't imagine that being the hardest fix, but those are three things the Broncos can do to make sure Bo continues to progress forward.
Yeah, when Patrick Coyote is a better pass catcher than half the receivers and all of the tight ends,
And he ain't lying.
It's a little bit of a problem. Not only that,
Stickies.
Pat is a better inline blocker, I think, than Lucas Kroll, who is the self-proclaimed, or maybe not self-proclaimed, but is allegedly the best player on the roster. At least I was told by a very
If I played wide receiver for Sean Payton, I would beg him every play, please run toss crack. Please, I'm dying to just crack a linebacker right in the chest.
Pat wants to run a play that has crack in it. Color me shocked. Cameron, what are you doing to fix the Broncos? Or how are you helping them to take the next step?
It kind of goes back to, someone like the dirty work, or, even after, even adding like the playoff experience. And I feel like it goes hand in hand with that, because, we'll probably talk about areas to address here in just a little bit here, but the playoff experience, I feel like, is one where you can really take advantage, because a lot of that, are players that have been there and done that. And so in embracing the culture and really taking advantage of the fact that you actually have this team literally get a playoff berth when no one else said that they were going to, you have to take advantage of that. So bringing in a lot of these players with that kind of experience, guys like a Chris Godwin, for example, obviously he's coming from injury, but those are those types of gritty players that you can add to this type of team that can really help take them to the next step and help your quarterback possibly not have a sophomore slump.
Frankie, build on that a little bit. How do you prevent Bo Nix from having a CJ Stroud level sophomore slump, and how are they taking the next step?
So I think spend the money, first of all. They need to just upgrade everything, and I don't even think they just need to do that on free agency. We saw the John Franklin Myers edition be such a massive opportunity for their defensive line last year. Right now, they have just this rich ownership group that can pay off any bonus that they need to in the league. So all of these teams, I've been saying it, there's been 12 3-win teams, 12 teams that have under 5 wins that are going to be changing out a lot of their front office. Those teams are going to be burning some of their big contracts. Some of those guys are not going to be sticking around, and Denver can take advantage of that, chuck a day 3 pick, and maybe acquire a more of a star talented piece. And I think one thing that yes, this team is talented. I do think that they're getting to the level, but they really shouldn't be limiting themselves in the upgrades they look to get. I think if something opens up at really, as we saw against Buffalo, I don't think anything on this team is a finished product. The passing game, the run defense, the passing defense, everything could use an upgrade at least somewhere. If they get the opportunity to acquire one of these star players, if a big name receiver, obviously that would be the dream if you can find an Andrew Brown-esque Stephon Diggs level addition. But man, if you can get a Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, maybe Chris Olave tries to work his way out of New Orleans, any of those guys that could end up just being the X factor for this team in the playoffs, because they just need star power, I think, at this point.
Yeah. Frankie, don't get me started.
Jordan, you always got
don't get me started with that AJ Brown talk.
This is nice. I'm trying to transition, so everybody shut the hell up really quick. Thank you. I had a really good thing planned, and everybody's ruining it. I was trying to build up Jordan. I had this really dope, very, very fun thing that I was going to say. So we're just going to act like none of that happened, and this awkward moment in the show didn't happen. But it's live, so we can't edit it, and that's fine. Jordan, you always have 10 toes in when you're standing on business because you're a big stepper. So how do the Broncos take that big step? Are the kids still singing that song nowadays? Jordan, go ahead.
It's just the way I do think that the next step, the run game, I think that's the biggest step going forward in 2025. I think the offensive identity needs to be a smash mouth football team offensively, and the run game needs to improve. The running back room needs to improve. I know we're going to talk about it later, but that room needs to be improved. And then me and Pat have talked about it. There may need to be a change at the center position, because I do know when there was a certain center starting for this team, the run game was better. I would not say his name because he's not that popular right now because of that game that happened in the city. But
Technically, he wasn't blocking for the run, though, so it's okay.
Exactly. But I will say that is the next step. That is the next step for this team. I think a new and improved run game. I mean, anything's improved from this year, but just a new run game for Bo Nix and this offense is going to help so much. And I think that is the next step.
Yeah, and I think that's nice, Jordan. That's a good point because they set the bar so incredibly low. Like, maybe this was just Sean Payton making Bo Nix play on all Madden. He's like, yeah, you're not really going to have a true wide receiver one. You're not going to have a tight end that can catch a pass. You're not going to have any sort of semblance of a run game. I'm not going to use the same running back more than a few times a game. And if a guy gets going, I'm going to take him out and put someone else in. Maybe this is just Sean Payton playing chess, not checkers, right? He wants to throw Bo Nix into the deep end and see if he sinks or swims, and clearly he swam. So to that end, as we're kind of talking about certain personnel, what I want you to do now, Jordan, as we're on the flip here, give me your unsung hero from this season. We all know about Pat Surtain. We know about Bo Nix. We know about Quinn Miners, like all the big name players, the all pros. Who is a player that, you don't think got enough credit for how much they contributed this season to the team?
I do think that guy, I know he ended the season not that great. I mean, you can say because of injury and whatnot and just going against better offenses, but I do really think if Riley Moss did not play that well in the beginning of the season and then towards that middle part of the season, I think the season would have went off the rails real quick.
That's our Jackie.
I mean, that is our Jackie, but I do believe the emergence of Riley Moss early on into the season and playing that well and being a really trust and reliable cornerback too for us. I mean, it helped a lot. It allowed Vance Joseph to be aggressive, blitzing wise, and all that. I really do believe Riley Moss was the unsung hero. And again, I know a lot of fans are probably going to think otherwise because how he ended the season. I mean, I think the injury took a toll on him. Again, he was facing against really good wide receiver twos anyway, especially in that game with the Bengals with T. Higgins. But I do believe that Riley Moss was the unsung hero for this season.
Frankie, I know you've seen a lot of stuff that most people haven't seen. So give us your unsung hero for the year.
So I want to highlight some guys on the coaching staff that I don't think have gotten enough love. Like, the defense was incredible this year. We all talk about it. I think a lot of praise gets thrown on Vance Joseph. A lot is getting put on Jim Leonard. When, yes, the defensive, the secondary was fantastic, but this team led the league in sacks by a wide margin. They had 63 sacks. That was Jamar Cain and that was Brandon Jones, two guys. That's their pass rush specialist coach, and that's their defensive line coach. Jamar Cain has worked with Nick Benito since he was at Oklahoma. We have seen just such a level up from him this year, and I think that can really be attributed to these guys. I really recommend following Brandon Jones on Twitter. He makes and not Brandon Jones, a safety. Again, this is a coach. He does great cut-ups of like Zach Allen and DJ Jones. He loves just he has really leveled up every single defensive lineman on this roster and their ability to get after the passer and get offensive linemen off balance. And it is awesome. So I wanted to highlight those guys because I haven't really seen them get talked about at all. And I mean, the defensive line is the strength of the defense.
I love that. Cam, you're my unsung hero, but who's yours?
I appreciate that. I'm actually surprised that Jordan get a chance to make mention Judy as far as Broncos making a trade for Judy. Anyway,
Cameron, I'm not going to let you derail this show. Don't do it.
But I got to say, the unsung hero is actually a wide receiver. And actually, I think it's Marvin Mims. Here's a guy who goes from basically roster bubble, like from weeks 1 to week 9, and then with like 56 receiving yards. And then he ends the season, finishing with over 500 yards and arguably, wide receiver 2 and becoming like an X factor for this team going forward and making it difficult, for like, what's the future of, Jaleel McLaughlin on some certain plays, so I think that like him being this type of wide receiver, really taking that next step in this offense and how they were able to use him in like a Jaden Reed type of role, or, possibly, I know people have been mentioning Deebo Samuel, but like Marvin Mims has really kind of asserted himself as like that true X factor now, and maybe that next step of growth, if you will, in 2025.
Joey, what do you think?
Mine is excuse me. Mine is offensive line. I'm going Mike McGlinchey. I don't think people realize, like, my boy caught hell when he first signed here. He caught hell all through last year. I feel like just this season was one of the better seasons I've seen from a Broncos right tackle for a little bit. Broncos have been really bad at right tackle for a long time. And Pat's looking at me crazy.
I'm not looking at you crazy.
He is looking at me crazy right now. I remember when Let's Talk. This is how bad it was.
Just how Pat looks.
I remember when Let's Talk Broncos took over KOA.
That phase, bro.
No, you're looking at me crazy. Stop it. You're distracting me. No, Let's Talk Broncos took over KOA. I remember there was like a Bigfoot sighting, and Zach was on the radio talking about we need to find that Bigfoot, but for no other reason than maybe the Broncos get the right tackle. Like, it was bad. He was catching hell out there, and
that was so funny.
You remember that? And for us to now like be in a spot where the Broncos have one of the best seasons from a right tackle, it's just cool to see. I like it. I'm here for it. Mike McGlinchey is the unsung hero, and I think everybody else is wrong.
Brian, Joey thinks that you're wrong. What do you think about that? Why is he muted again?
Because you keep muting me, dude.
I'm not muting you, Glenn.
Get a better sound
Zach
system.
Seegers is upset that he didn't get to do this version of Engage 8. You replaced him, so he's
saying
muting you.
Yeah, but anyway.
You can unmute yourself, Glenn.
I'm not
Come
seeing
on,
it.
Glenn.
Listen, this is my first time, so thank you guys. I appreciate it. Be gentle. My unsung hero is a syndicate. It's Davis Webb and the quarterback room. You know, I think that every time you saw Bo walk to that sideline, Davis was right there. The simpatico between those two guys is definitely evident. And I think that we need to do whatever we can to keep him on this staff. And I'm sure that is already in the plans to do that. And with the quarterback room, you know, he had the support of Stidham and Wilson, and even extended into even the families, and that the three couples actually were always hanging out. I think that whole comfortable nature and not having the pressure with, you know, any animosity in that room, and having a coach that was doing a great job, just helped him throughout the year. So that's what I think was.
Glenn, Boggins for some reason wants you to know 6.5 inches, which seems like a gross overstatement for someone like Boggins. Bree, who is your unsung hero on the season?
I love how that's my transitional thing.
You get the best ones. You're welcome.
I've got so many write-ups to do later. Like, you're making so much paperwork for me. I really don't appreciate it.
Let's be honest, Bree, you are the worst HR person in the history of HR. The shit that Pat and I get away with routinely speaks volumes to that. Now, please tell me your unsung hero.
Okay. I want to play off of I loved Frankie's point, by the way. Frankie nailed it. But I want to say, with all the love that Nick Benito is rightfully earning this season, I feel like Jonathan Cooper kind of gets left out to dry a little bit, right? The duo, a part of the league leading squad for sacks, had the first double-digit tandem since the 2018 Miller and Chubb. And I think when teams have to face that, I'm surprised there weren't more holding calls against the opposing teams, because Coop he's got too strong of a get-off. He's that talented and he's that intense that I'm surprised he didn't have more of an impact. And he ended the regular season tied for 12th most overall sacks. It's not shabby, but he definitely contributed to the success of others reaching the QB. Pressures, absolutely brutal. The Broncos ended up with 16 different individuals contributing to sacks this season, and I just find that remarkable. And I think Jonathan Cooper lends himself to that stat.
Absolutely. Pat, there goes my hero, but who's yours?
What's up, baby? Look, mine's going to be a little controversial. Lil Jordan Humphrey does not get the credit that he should deserve as a wide receiver in this blocking game. I'm sorry. I'm just going to say it. I have been battling with people on Twitter for the last 2-3 days.
I never thought I would wish that you would talk about Burton.
Brother, come on. That's too easy. Lil Jordan is my unsung hero for the offense, because you got to have wide receivers that block well. And I feel like he was easily one of the best, probably the best wide receiver blocking this season. But my defensive one is Dondre Tillman. We talked about this dude in the preseason. We talked about it last show. I won't spend too much time on it, but man,
we introduced the world to Tillman.
That dude can ball. The fact that he's been doing it for so long is crazy. Definitely another one of those defensive unsung heroes that Bree was talking about.
Yeah, I think he was massive, Pat. And again, I want to focus on him because this was a guy that we saw in camp and we're like, this dude has to make the team. He's too good not to make the team. In fact, He was playing so well that he was honestly a big reason why the team felt as comfortable as they did trading Baron Browning. I think Baron Browning is going to ultimately prove that maybe it wasn't the best idea, or maybe they could have gotten a little bit more from him. But I'm a Baron Browning homer, so I digress. But what Dondre Tillman was able to do, and I just want to highlight this because Pat and I talked about it on the show last week. If you are unaware of Dondre Tillman's story, he obviously came from the UFL. That man played 12 football games before playing a snap in the NFL. Starting at the end of March, and I think they went until like mid-July, he signed an NFL contract with the Broncos. I think it was like a day or two after his team won their third straight spring football championship, and he basically got right back into it. So he played damn near 30 professional football games, NFL or otherwise. That is unbelievably impressive. And despite all of that, was still producing at the end of the season, had a sack against Cincinnati, had a sack against
led the team in pressure rate. According to Frankie's film, led the team in pressure rate.
It's insane. So didn't want to get too distracted, but definitely wanted to highlight like how incredible of a season and a feat that Dondre Tillman gave us this year. And I hope, I don't know what his contract looks like. I think he's an exclusive rights free agent. They would be absolutely foolish to let him walk. I don't think he's going to cost you that much money. He's the perfect situational pass rusher. And imagine if he has like an actual offseason to train and to heal instead of playing a whole last season before an additional NFL season. What's our next topic? I don't know.
I had one more, Mario. Somewhere. I had one more. JL Skinner for the special teams.
Okay, go on, Pat.
That's it. That's the tweet.
Any JL in particular that you? Okay.
Special teams extraordinaire. Special teams savant. The streets are saying.
Special teams, special players.
Amen.
Or however that weird saying went from the what is he, a TikTok guy who did the special? I don't know. Fuck it. He's stupid anyway.
Sketch.
Wow. Since we're talking about unsung heroes, I want to now start thinking forward. We've all kind of touched on the needs and what this team has to do to get back into the fold. Now I want some specifics. And so and we've covered it. Like, as good as this team looked this season, there were a lot of holes on the roster. As good as the defense looked, there were still a lot of not very good players who were, probably on most teams are backups or special team players. They're getting meaningful snaps on this defense, even on this offense. So what I want from each of you right now, give me the one position. And again, there are several, but the one position they need to address more than anything, and the very specific player that you want to fill that hole. Fill the hole, Pat.
Hey. You're talking about filling holes, man.
Fill the hole.
You're talking about filling holes.
If there's anyone that can fill a hole, it's Pat.
Jesus.
Where's my flag?
We need a whistle and a flag right now. Mine is
holes
running
on the
back.
Roster. You guys are being gross.
Mine is running back. Pick one. Honestly, just pick one from this draft class.
Yes, that is what I'm asking you to do.
Any one of them. No, that's what I'm saying. It's just any one of them. The team needs to just get someone else in that room that can provide more, like better than what they are getting right now, because it's awful. It's terrible. And you could replace it with any one of the top guys. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be the first round guy. It doesn't have to be Jainty. It could be literally any of these dudes. I think all of them would be an instant upgrade in that room. This team needs a run game in the offense now. Running back.
Bree, it's your turn to fill that hole.
Oh.
That is not a segment that's going to be approved. I'm telling you right now.
Do we have an intro video for that?
Pat, next week. Brand new segment on altitude adjustment. I can't wait.
Man, it's like I say, don't do it, and they jump right off the cliff. Okay, all right.
Tell me to do something, I won't do that thing. We've known each other for like 6 years. How do you not know this?
The rails are gone.
Oh my God, the rails have fallen off. They're on fire, and my cheeks are red. Let's go. Okay, I know everyone here is all about the draft.
And now
right?
you're talking about your cheeks, Bree. Not appropriate. Can we stay on topic, please?
It took him a second to say that. I literally felt like I heard his brain saying, "Should I do this or not?" And then it happened.
This is getting out of hand. Bree, you got to get us back on track here.
Bree.
Right. Okay. I will attempt to answer the question. Mario is notorious for talking right over me. But I love the idea that you guys all want to draft and develop key positional groups here. I know there's a lot of skilled players that you have your eyes on, but I'm a fan of proven talent. So let's say it's a 4-year span, right? You have precious time and resources. The window is going to close faster than you can anticipate, and you need at least one star. We've been saying star power all night, and it needs to be the one that's going to spark this team, and it's got to be on the offense right now. And I can't shake the name. So many of you have tried to talk me out of it because of the gruesome injury that we saw him face this season, but Chris Godwin would make just a tremendous addition to this team as the slot receiver for Bo Nix. Reliable hands. He's exceptionally talented. I know T. Higgins is kind of the hotter name here, but with the lower leg injury, I know it makes you hesitant, but I think the growth in the wide receiver group alone would be impossible to ignore. If the Bucs are likely to move off, they've got a ton of other larger contracts that are looming, and I think Sean Payton would be interested. I heard there was a little bit of interest there when he was coming out of college. I know the question is going to be, I already talked about it, financial responsibility, but financial flexibility allows $23 million for this to be an okay option.
Zach.
Glenn, what position and what player?
I'm just impressed that Mario has managed to incorporate the top 6 Pornhub search terms that he uses into his topics for tonight. So bravo, sir.
You picked up on what I was putting down. I'm proud of you. A lot of people don't think that you're sharp, but don't listen to them.
That is incredible.
So for me, position's got to be tight end. You know, when you see the other teams have a productive down the field tight end force, and we are missing that in a massive way, I think that's got to be the one. You know, from a draft standpoint, Tyler Warren, but I would love to see George Kittle in a Broncos uniform.
Oh, that's bold. I would love to hang out with George Kittle. Joey, what do you got?
I'm trailing Glenn on this. I think tight end. Tight end is the position I'm looking at that's like this draft one, I think, is loaded at tight end. There's plenty of capable guys out there in this draft that you can go get. A guy I love is Gunnar Helm from Texas. He went to Cherry Creek High School as well, was a Dave Logan guy in high school. So that one makes some sense. I think like he can block well. He's great receiving the ball. He's a pretty good receiver. I wouldn't say a standout in any one category, but good and an upgrade for this offense. I just say tight end because I think it was just that bad this year. I think that is one that's really easily that you can increase your value there, just drafting a guy and getting better results. I think it's easy to do that from Adam Troutman, who I also think deserves a roster spot, but probably not to the level he's at right now. He's not your main guy out there. So I especially receiving, it's going to be pretty easy to upgrade from him in that area.
Yeah, again, you're right, Joey. A low bar, but it's definitely.
Hey, we're running 23 personnel.
Even in the tackle too.
Cameron, biggest position in need, and how are you addressing it?
I keep going back and forth between, having a tight end one or even a running back one. I kind of go back and forth between this. But I'm going to be a bit of a surprise and not go the tight end route and actually go with the wide receiver. And I'm going to stick with the San Francisco 49ers, but it's not Deebo Samuel. I'm actually going to go and say that the Broncos should trade for Juwan Jennings. He only signed a 2-year deal with the San Francisco 49ers. I mean, and if the 49ers, which might be in a very interesting, precarious situation, of course, in 2025, I'm making the call. Like I'm making the call, and I'm getting a wide receiver like Juwan Jennings. He's clearly a wide receiver that is very well known about doing the dirty work. I am all aboard, swinging some draft capital for a guy like a Juwan Jennings. He's obviously not a household name like that, but yeah, I'm all for that.
And maybe the best thing about Juwan Jennings is that if you acquire a Juwan Jennings, then you don't need Lil Jordan Humphrey, which would be a win-win for everybody.
What is this undeserved hate?
I had to. Frankie, what do you think?
They need explosiveness in the run game. It was such an issue. It was so annoying this season watching them try to run the ball. I mean, they were able to pick up some 10, 15-yard chunks. They were actually, I think, 14th in the NFL in 10-plus yard carries. Bo Nix being a big part of that with his scrambling. And then they only scored 12 rushing touchdowns on the entire season, which, again, I think Bo had 4 of those.
Yep.
So it's just kind of – they need to have a guy – I put out a tweet earlier. They need to have a guy that can score from anywhere on the field in the running game. They need to have a guy that can actually threaten teams that, hey – if I actually hit the right gap in zone, which they haven't had a guy that can do this season, I can take this 60, 70 yards to the house, because anyone who's watched Shanahan, whether in Denver or in San Francisco, that's what it is. You have a guy that can have the vision to see the gap and just shoot it so hard that it says, all right, well, we're gone. We're out the gate. Jaleel has been able to do that this year with his vision, but in my mind, he just doesn't have that final gear to be able to take those runs 50, 60 yards to the house. Obviously, Saquon Barkley is a rare, you're not going to be able to get something like that, but you need a guy to take advantage of these light boxes. Denver only saw a 38% light box count this year. There's a lot of people that seem to have this misconception that, like, oh, teams were just stacking the box against Denver. That's why they couldn't run. People were saying that about the Buffalo game. Guys, Buffalo was playing 4 down linemen. They were putting nickel corners in at linebacker. They were daring Denver to run the ball. And Sean still only ran it 12 times. I don't know what people are talking about. They was too committed to run. That's ridiculous. Anyways, so
thank you.
They need to add Travion Henderson from OSU. That's the end of it. He's going to be their Jahmyr Gibbs next year, and he's just going to be lightning in a bottle for this team, which they desperately need.
Is it?
So we've heard wide receivers, running backs, tight ends. Jordan, who are you adding to this team?
I will say the running backs would be the popular answer on this, or the tight ends. I think those are the most obvious ones. I'm going to go a different route. I'm going to go with my favorite position group in football. So wide receivers. I'm done watching a lot of our wide receivers right now run around with Knicks. I'm just done. Listen, I know I've been criticized with my love-hate relationship with Cortland Sutton, but I think it's time to go get a real wide receiver one. Whether that's T. Higgins, which is going to be my top choice, trading for Garrett Wilson, maybe even a Deebo Samuel, depending on what situation is going on over there, maybe even drafting one. I don't know if we're going to go round 1 with a wide receiver. I highly doubt it. But there are a few sleepers in the round 2, round 3, round 4 of this draft, at least in my opinion. I'm looking at Xavier Restrepo out of the U, but he won't be a wide receiver one, but he's a good slot wide receiver for Bo. But yeah, we need to add a bona fide wide receiver one, like a game changer, an X factor for Bo, because in my opinion, Sutton is not that guy for Bo, and I don't see him being that guy next year. So we need a true wide receiver one.
Strong words from Jordan Lopez. Now, if anyone is unfamiliar with this show, and if you are, then shame on you, to be perfectly honest. But one of our favorite things to do here, actually probably mine and Pat's favorite part of the show, is when we talk about something that really has us fired up, gets us really excited. And the only way to really describe it so to close.
Why is it so loud?
I want to know what gets everybody bricked up. And you can answer this question any way that you see fit. If there was something from the previous season that got you bricked up, if there's something about the future that got you bricked up, if there's a certain free agent or an incoming rookie that could potentially have you bricked up, any way that you want to answer. So, Jordan, what has you bricked up about the Denver Broncos?
Well, I think the easiest answer, and I think it should be everyone's, it's Bo Nix. I mean, You gotta be doing lines of Bo Kane and shots of Bo Zempic at this point.
A boner.
Or
One
there
would
you go,
say.
Pat. There you go, Pat. I mean, it has to be Bo Nix. The way he developed throughout the year and the way he played, especially with the supporting cast that he had. I mean, I think that you have to be bricked up for Bo.
You can't spell boner without Bo.
Yeah,
Speaking of boner, what has you bricked up?
I'm absolutely bricked about Zach Allen. Zach Allen being like a true like top 5 defensive lineman for this team is so cool. Like last season, he was like a top 10 player, top 15. He had an incredible season, but he was not getting the recognition. This year, he just even upgraded further. That now he's just like going to be. I think. Did he make the All Pro team? Did he not? Was
Second
he
team.
He was second team
All Pro team if he didn't. He's just an excellent player, and he's going to be like they've needed an ace on that defensive line for a couple of years now since they lost Chubb and Von Miller. They haven't really had that guy that like, all right, offensive lines need to account for where this guy is on every single snap. That is Zach Allen for this team right now. It is Nick Benito in some circumstances, but Zach Allen is really that guy that like he is just a nightmare for interior offensive linemen.
Cam, what has you bricked up?
I have to echo and continue the sentiment with Jordan, and it is Bo Nix, but it's the 67 air yards. Like that's the one thing that just it always has me bricked up. Is like here's a guy who, I mean, like when you look at it, I mean, like here's a guy who has been criticized with his arm the moment he stepped into the league. And he's basically shut everybody up the moment he stepped foot on the football field with the Broncos, and he's made Sean Payton look like a genius. I mean, he doesn't look like the 6th quarterback. I mean, and one area where I think it really confirmed it is how many times would you look at it from like the Kansas City Chiefs side of things where Spagnuolo was talking up Drew Lock a little bit and. And he's actually, in this case, in this particular year, he's talking up Bo Nix, but Bo Nix actually makes him look good in the sense of like how like he's proving every single point that Spagnuolo has been making. So I think that when you look at it and you look at everything, he is the guy. Like he is absolutely the guy. I mean, 67 air yards.
The 67 air yards, making Cam go 6 to midnight. Joey, what about you?
Yeah, Joey, what gets you bricked up?
I got how this NFL drafts, like the strongest parts of this NFL draft seem to correlate with the Broncos' needs. We spent a lot of time on here talking about running backs and tight ends, and I could argue that those are the 2 of the strongest positions in this draft class. I'm also very excited about Let's Talk Broncos' own Frankie Abbott in the bottom there, and Jacob Romano being able to go to the Senior Bowl and then getting that insight from them. That's going to be super exciting. There's a ton of talent there, and yeah, I'm just excited about the draft, and I think how it lines up with the Broncos.
Glenn, what about you?
Real quick, just reminding you to do that Manscaped read. I didn't want you to trim and wear the scoop neck blouse for nothing. So, but you know what got me bricked up, dude? It's the fact that I've been watching the games all along, but all of a sudden now the nervous feeling, the not being able to stay seated, the pacing around, the yelling at the screen, getting those butterflies in your stomach during the game, just being fully invested and those emotions, and they haven't been there for a long time, and now we have reason for that. So that's gotten me bricked up.
I love that. Bree, people think that women can't get bricked up, but they are misogynistic assholes. So why don't you let them know what gets you bricked up?
Okay, I had a hard time deciding, but I'm going to go with kind of piggybacking off of what Glenn said, because the absolute perfection that was making the playoffs was just topped off with that first drive for the Broncos. That first drive, first TD, their first playoff game in 9 years, 5 plays, no huddle shotgun, and it culminated in a 43-yard touchdown to Troy Franklin. It was like the drive was designed in the wildest dreams for Broncos country, and at the sacrifice of ever scoring again for the rest of the season. So I don't know how much I loved the end result of the game, but I absolutely loved the drive because of how much passion it brought out of all of us. I think everyone was stunned and was also so excited by that moment. And that leaves so much more to the, like, you want to see more out of this team. You can't wait to see what they're going to do heading into next season. I don't know whose notifications are going off, but I hate you. And then at the end of the day, I'm just excited to be a Broncos fan again. So that's what's got me bricked up.
You got it. Broncos fans were a powder keg ready to go off, and that touchdown to Troy Franklin, it just set everything off. Speaking of a powder keg ready to go off.
Oh my God. What's getting me bricked up about the Broncos? Man, this whole season's got me absolutely throbtastic. I mean, this is just this season has been
throbtastic.
Yeah. This
put a hashtag on that, puppy. That's going on a shirt.
This team is fun to watch again in the best ways. You know, I think a little bit of anxiety was relieved. You know, when we knew that they were getting into the playoffs, because it, like, all that time that we had spent watching this team try and just not be able to put anything that was even worth watching on the field. I mean, Mario, like the Seattle game, bro, like that, we thought that was going to be the pinnacle. Like, we thought, like, oh, finally we're back, and it just came crashing down in the worst way. And it was like, how much longer are we going to have to deal with this? And the answer was not that long, because I think this trajectory for this team is just going up and up and up. Sean Payton is doing a fantastic job building the locker room culture. You can see it, you can hear it, you know, in the way that players speak, and even when they make mistakes, even when things don't seem the best, you know, you're losing close games, you're, you know, getting blown out in the playoffs. They needed that. They needed that ass whooping. I can't remember who it was, but somebody posted John Elway's first playoff game, 31-7 loss. That sucked, right? Like, and being a fan, like, that sucks. Like, your quarterback's first playoff game, and they get absolutely trounced, and then that guy goes on to greatness. Who knows what can happen from there? But I can tell you right now that team needed to get their ass beat like that. They definitely did, because it's only going to make them better in the long run. Can't wait to see who comes here in free agency. Can't wait to see what their plan is for the draft. I'm really, really excited. And man, it feels great to have a quarterback. Could you imagine not taking a quarterback last year and having to pick from this fucking crop of nonsense? Absolutely not.
Say, I was one of the people advocating that the Broncos just take BPA and then target Shedeur Sanders this year. And man, am I glad that they did not listen to me, because as much as I like Shedeur Sanders, I love me some Bo Nix. And let me tell y'all what has me bricked up. It's all of you wonderful people right here. The fact that we exist in a community where 8 of us can come together, mostly genuinely good people, and then also Glenn is there. And everybody knows as much as they do about the Broncos. It's fantastic. Like, this is the kind of discourse that we should always be approaching, that we should always be after. And there's a lot of shit out there. There are a lot of bad podcasts. There are a lot of bad radio people. There are a lot of clickbait artists who don't believe half the crap or any of the crap that's coming out of their mouths. But that is not true with this group here. Every single thing that you get from every single individual on this panel is 100% true, and not trying to get it for likes. You know why? Because we don't need to rely on stuff like that, because we're actually knowledgeable and passionate about the things that we're talking about. We're not some scrub that could never get a job doing anything else anywhere else and have to rely on shock therapy in order to get people to watch and pay attention to what we're saying and doing. That's not what we do. We genuinely love this team, and we are going to give you our honest to God opinion about where they are and where they're going and where they're going to end up. That's what has me bricked up. My name is Mario Vitanzi, my co-host Patrick Chiotti. Thank you so much to Bree Maestas, Glenn Hauser, Joey Richards, Cameron Parker, Frankie, I don't know your last name, and Jordan Lopez. I appreciate you all so much for jumping on, and this has been another fantastic edition of Engage 8 on Altitude Adjustment. I didn't really think through this transition because I also have another video to play. So thanks for watching, everybody. Okay, love you. Bye-bye.
Hey, feel I'm in the mood for a switch up. I hit the function, hit the rose till I hiccup. I hit the stage and leave.